Hey yo, welcome to our next installment of our ongoing Ultimate Ableton 11 tutorial series. Wow, that's a mouthful. In this video, we're going to dive deeper into clip view and investigating clips more in depth. But as always, before we jump in, we got a quote of the day. And this one is from Mr. Paulo Coelho. I hope that I pronounced that right. And the quote is, "When you want something, all of the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." And this invites the idea that if you are passionate about something, if you know that something is a big part of your life, such as music production, playing music, producing it, whatever it is, and you know that's a big part of your life, there is something magical that happens when you decide to pursue your passion or your dreams, whatever it may be, in the sense that things start to fall together. When you really start to commit yourself to your craft, you know that this is something that's a big part of you and you really pour yourself into it. It's funny how a lot of the times it seems that the universe seems to drop certain situations, certain coincidences, certain events, you meet certain people, things unfold in a certain way once you decide to follow your passion and follow your dreams. Just want to motivate you and inspire you that whatever your goals are relative to developing your music production craft or producing your own music, that whatever your big picture goal is within music production, making music, sharing it with the world, whatever your big picture goal is, I just want you to keep moving forward towards it. And the more you pour yourself into it, the more you believe in it, you believe in yourself. I just want to inspire you that the more you pour yourself into that dream, into that goal, into achieving that, making it reality, you'll see that the universe tends to have your back. Hey yo, it's Alex from Mind Music, and as always with this channel, it's my mission to help musicians produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their inner artist in a deeper way. And in this video, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into investigating clips and clip view and kind of showing you some of the powerful things that you can play with within those realms. And this is a fundamental part to understand to really maximize the utilization and the functionality of Ableton 11 is really understanding clips very well. All right, it is essential to understand this stuff to make the most out of this program. And as we've covered, a clip basically is a container for an idea. This could be a WAV file, it could be MP3, it could be a MIDI clip, it could even be a video, right? And as we've seen before, these empty cells populate clips, whether it's an audio clip or a MIDI clip, they live within these cells and then they can be articulated into a timeline within the arrangement view as well. So with an audio track, we could populate a clip by simply going to our samples folder, typing in loop into the search bar, finding a loop we like, clicking it and dragging it into that cell. We could also record audio, which we will get into in another video. And then for a MIDI clip, we could create a clip and pencil in notes this way, or we could actually record some MIDI notes. So I'm going to do that real quick. I have this piano sound loaded. Maybe something like that. Let's record that real quick. Super simple. All right, and with an audio clip or a MIDI clip, you can double click on the clip to open up clip view. All right, and this is what clip view looks like for an audio clip, and this is what clip view looks like for a MIDI clip. All right, and what I want to do is kind of go over some of the main features and main controls that you'll see in clip view. So as we know, in session view, we're dealing with loops, right? We are dealing with ideas that are going to be looping and looping and looping and looping and looping over and over. One of the most important controls that you'll see in clip view is this movable loop bar. All right, so there's this blue bar at the top, and what this will allow you to do is select a specific portion of your clip to loop. All right, so let's say I just wanted this part to loop over and over. I'm just going to stop this other clip for now. All right, so now the clip is only looping the selection that I've made. You can also click on this loop selector and move the whole selection over and find a different part that you like. Right now there's a different section of this audio loop that is actually looping, and you'll notice that there's another bar underneath this main bar. So let me open this a little bit more. You'll see that there's this loop selector bar that we've been playing with, but there's this other selector which actually will decide where the loop starts. So right now it's starting midway through the loop, as you can see, and then it loops around, but I could start it here, for example. Right? Or we could start it at the beginning. Right? You could even loop an odd amount of time, right? And then we could, let's say, start the loop somewhere weird like this. And get some really weird polyrhythmic effects going on just by playing with the loop start and the loop selector in the clip view. All right, very important feature, very powerful feature. All right, so I'm just going to lengthen this loop selector so that the whole loop is playing once again. And next, what I want to talk about is warp markers. And one thing to know about Ableton, which actually stands it apart from many other DAWs, is that anytime you audition a sample, whether it's in your library or you import some sort of audio track into your DAW, Ableton will automatically warp it. And what this actually means is it's actually going to make it fit automatically with the tempo of your project. And we haven't really touched the tempo settings of a project yet, but just know that in the top left-hand corner, you have a number here which represents the speed of your project. And one cool thing about Ableton is if you adjust the tempo of your project, it will automatically warp everything to fit the timing that you are choosing with your tempo selector. So for example, if I hit play here and change the tempo, you'll notice it speeds up or slows down automatically. And the way that Ableton does this is by warping the track or stretching it to fit into whatever tempo you've selected without changing the pitch. And it does this automatically. So it's super handy to sample ideas from different projects so that they all fit together in time. And of course, you can turn that on and off with this warp button here. All right, but let's leave that on for now. And if I hit play and change the tempo, notice how this sample just follows along. Right, I can slow it right down, or let's speed it right back up. All right, so what's happening right now is Ableton is automatically warping this track to fit with whatever tempo I've selected, and that's a super powerful feature of Ableton. All right, if we look a little bit closer into some of the controls that you see here in Clip View, you'll notice that there's a warp button. And this is the button you would press if, for example, you did not want to warp a track. So if I turn off this warp button, now the file will not be warped and it will just play back at its original tempo. So if I hit play, you'll notice that it's out of time now. Right? It doesn't line up because I have this warp button unselected. So typically you want to leave the warp button on so that it dynamically changes with Ableton's tempo and that it beat matches everything so that it's easy to work with. However, if you're doing something more complex or something different and you want to work with the original tempo of whatever file you're playing with, then you can hit warp and turn it off. And you'll notice underneath that warp button, there's a drop-down menu, and these are basically different algorithms that Ableton will use to warp your audio files with. And we won't get into this in depth right now. However, there's some really cool and very advanced, powerful stuff you can do by changing the actual warp algorithm here. But for now, we're gonna leave it to the default, which is complex. If we move on here, you'll see that this is the BPM of the original track that's shown to you right here. So the original BPM of this sample is 80, and we are working in 105 right now. So right now it's being sped up by, what is that, 25 BPMs, and it's being warped, so it's getting shortened so that it can fit in that new timing. But if you're ever curious about the original timing of a clip, or you want to match the original timing of a sample, it usually shows you the information right here. Right beside that, we have a ×2 and a divided by 2 button. And this will actually allow you to double the speed of the loop or to divide the speed of the loop by 2. So for example, if I hit this ×2, it's extremely fast, but it's just playing twice as fast as it was before. Alternatively, if I hit this other button twice to go back to normal and then to go once more to slow it down twice as much, now it's playing half as fast as it was before. So it's super sluggish. Alright, I'm just going to restore it to its normal for now. A few other fun controls that you'll see on the clip view for an audio clip is this transpose knob. And this will actually allow you to transpose the pitch up or down of whatever sample you're working with. So with this big knob, you can actually change the pitch or transpose the pitch of whatever sample you're playing with this knob. So let me show that to you. So now we went up in pitch, and we can lower it down in pitch. And notice how it still stays in time regardless of what pitch that we choose. Very powerful feature. Next, underneath that transpose knob, we have the same thing, but in sense. So the transpose knob actually moves the pitch up or down in intervals, similarly to what you'd see on a piano keyboard. But if you want to fine tune the pitch in sense, so between those intervals, you would use this meter to move it up sense. So these are parts of a pitch. It's not even moving up a whole pitch per notch, it's moving up parts of a pitch. Next is the gain knob, and this is very useful if you record multiple different audio sources and maybe some are louder than others but on the same track. You can actually change the gain, so the volume of the clip, independently of the track and independently of other clips. Very useful feature to play around with. If something is slightly too loud or slightly too quiet, you can increase or decrease the gain right here. I'm just going to double click on that to restore to the defaults. And then next we have this reverse button. If you hit that, it will actually reverse the whole sample. So let's click that, and now this whole sample has been reversed, and let's listen to that. Put it back to normal. Very fun setting to play around with. All right, next in this clip view is kind of this looper section. And most of the time you're gonna have this loop button on in session view, but if we turn this on and we play this clip, it's only gonna play through the loop once and then it's going to stop. So here's an example. It's gonna play once through and then it's gonna automatically stop. But with loop on, it's going to consistently loop over and over, and that's pretty much the default that you'll see in session view. However, this can be super handy if you just want a loop to trigger once when you launch a scene or something. It can be really fun. Next, these start and end controls that you see over this loop button are basically the numerical representation of these selectors that we've been over. Notice as I move the selector, these numbers change. Right, so notice how the top number changes with the loop beginning selector. This is where the loop will start. And then notice how the bottom number changes with the actual loop selector right here. So you can change that by clicking and dragging these little arrows on top of the clip, or you can also just type in the numbers here. You can also change the time signature of every single individual clip independent of the time signature of your track. So for example, if you had a track in 4/4, which is just 1, 2, 3, 4, you could have a clip in 3/4 timing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that can be really cool to create some cool polyrhythms, some really cool complex stuff going on. So if you wanted to change the time signature of a clip, you would do that here. So this next section is what's called the groove section, and this is super handy for quantizing or changing the groove of your MIDI clip or your audio clip towards a predetermined groove that is either stored in your groove folder in your browser, or you can extract that from any of your ideas that you come up with. Very cool stuff. Very powerful stuff. We won't get into that right now. We'll get into that in another video, but it's very powerful and cool to play with. All right, next I want to talk about what are called warp markers. And these are super powerful things that you can utilize within an audio clip in its clip view. And what this actually does is it allows you to place markers at specific points in a clip. And you can actually time stretch and warp certain parts of the clip to line up at certain beats to your liking. So for example, so what I can do is actually double click on some of these areas of our clip here and select areas that I want to use as anchor points. And then I can go in here and actually drag them to be different timings. So let's put the beginning here, and let's say I wanted this snare to land earlier, and like let's say I wanted this hi-hat to happen later, right? So right now I warped those markers so time stretched it so that they line up at different points within this audio clip. So let's listen to this. So you can get some really cool stretched out stuff. Let's push this back to 3. Let's stretch this back. We could also maybe move this here. We could stretch this here. We could play around and really stretch this thing out and really play with the timing of this audio clip. Where you can get some really progressive, really cool stuff by playing around with warp markers and moving them. And then finally, for the audio clip view, there's this second tab here. And the second tab will actually allow you to adjust various parameters and automate certain parameters within the clip itself. And this is super powerful because any changes you make to a clip is saved within the clip's information. It doesn't change the original loop that I took, which is also called non-destructive editing. Super powerful, but all this means is that any changes you program, any warps you do, any transposition you do within a clip is saved to that specific clip. It doesn't affect the original file, and you can do some really cool stuff within the clip itself. So for example, right now we're looking at the gain setting of this whole clip, and right now we have max volume, which is synonymous with gain for the whole clip. But I could go in here and I could pencil different values so that the volume of this clip changes over time. So let's listen to that. So notice how the volume of this clip goes up and down relative to what I drew in. You can also do this with the transposition. So I could change the pitch of different parts of the clip and automate it within the clip itself by drawing this in and changing the pitch. This is going to sound crazy, but let's just change the pitch like crazy and see what this sounds like. Pretty whacked out, eh? And I'm showing you an extreme example, but you could do this very subtly if you wanted a really small part of your audio file to have a different pitch. This could be great for maybe changing the pitch of a performance or changing the pitch of a vocal performance. Whatever you want to do, you could have fun with doing that within the clip itself. All right, so next let's look at a MIDI clip, because when you open up a MIDI clip in clip view, it's actually a little bit different than what you see for clip view for an audio clip. So right now I have this audio clip selected, but I'm going to go ahead and double click on the MIDI clip that I have here. And you'll notice that it brings up the MIDI clip view. So when we move over to clip view for a MIDI clip, you'll notice this piano roll, and this piano roll actually demonstrates the representation of the performance I did with musical data. So if I hit play, you'll notice that the chords I played are represented here on the piano roll. And what's super powerful about this is that you can go into a performance and you can click a note and you can edit it. You could bring it down a pitch. You could bring it up a pitch. You could shorten the length. You could cut it shorter if you wanted. You could enhance it. You can do this with multiple notes. You can move them all together. You can actually pencil in notes if you wanted to by double clicking. You could right click and change the grid, so we could move to, let's say, quarter notes instead of 16th notes. Right? And you can like delete and add notes, all within this piano roll editor. So that's one of the major differences you'll see between an audio clip and a MIDI clip. The MIDI clip has the MIDI data that you can pencil in, you can play in, you can edit, you can change, all that fun stuff, while the audio clip is a representation of an audio file, which you can warp and you can change the timing of, all that cool stuff. But you'll see that the loop selector area for a MIDI clip is the same as an audio clip. Same with the loop selector or the loop start selector. I could shorten the length of this loop if I wanted to just being the second chord, and half as long as it was before. Or I could pull this back and regain the full length, or I could actually make this loop start at a different point. So let's get it to start halfway through. So now we're starting with that second chord. Another important thing for MIDI is this velocity menu down here, which you can drag up and down. Same goes with the clip view. You can click this and drag this up and down to get more screen real estate. So let's drag it way up and drag up the velocity. And velocity is basically MIDI information that indicates how hard a note is being played or how much velocity it has. So for example, if I play my piano very softly, it gives a certain sound, but if I play it really hard, it's a lot louder. And that information is represented from a value of 0 to 127, which is basically the MIDI language. And you can actually adjust the volume of every single note individually here. So if I want to make these notes more quiet, I would just drag this down, and I made these notes a lot more quiet now. A lot more subtle. Right? I could also do this by selecting all these notes and then dragging all of their velocities down at the same time. Now the performance is going to be a lot more subtle, a lot less loud. Right, so playing around with MIDI notes, note lengths, and velocity are kind of the building blocks of creating really compelling musical performances. And you find the velocity setting down here in the clip view. And if you notice, in this bottom left-hand corner, there's a couple other menus that you can actually access as well. So if we open this one, you'll notice that there's this chance menu that comes up. Right, we can click and drag this as well. And what chance represents, which is actually new to Ableton 11, is a gradient of possibility per note. And what this means, if chance is at 100%, that means that 100% of the time the note will be triggered. However, if I bring this chance down, so let's select these middle chords, for example. All right, let's select these four, and let's say I bring their chance down to about 50%. Now, 50% of the time, they're going to be triggered, and 50% of the time, they're not going to be triggered. So it adds that element of randomness, of unpredictability, and another whole layer of stuff that you can edit within MIDI. So let's play this and see how often that second chord gets triggered. Okay, got triggered this time. Great. All right, got triggered this time as well. Great. Oh, not that time. So you can see that playing with the chance of various notes can really help create unpredictability, a little bit more human feel, and really maybe inspire some new creative things by randomizing some notes. We also have a third button down here, which will collapse these two menus similarly to every other view that we have in Ableton. If you click this arrow, it will hide the velocity and chance settings. If you want to pop them back up, just hit that little arrow once again. So on the piano roll, we actually have a representation of the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. So basically, we have all the pitches that you would see on any instrument, such as a guitar, piano, bass, you name it. Right? And we can actually hold Alt and scroll up or down to zoom out and to get multiple octaves. All right, so we can play these notes in higher octaves by moving these notes up. We can go all the way up in pitch, and we can go all the way down in pitch. So within this piano roll, you can reach the top pitches and the low pitches for every single instrument. And you'll notice that over the piano roll, you have couple buttons and this little headphone button. Now this little headphone button is extremely important to have on if you want to actually be able to hear what you're programming. Because if this is selected off and I move this note around, it doesn't actually play. So you don't actually get a sense of what note it's being moved to. Or if you're penciling in notes, you're not going to have any feedback as to what notes you're actually penciling in. But if you want that feedback, you have to make sure that this little headphone button is turned on. Now, when I pencil in a note, you'll hear it. Or if I select a note, you'll hear it. If I move it, you hear to where it gets moved. So on top of this setting is a fold button and a scale button. And what a fold button does is actually Ableton will read what notes you're actually using in that clip. So right now I have two different chords of notes that I'm using. If I hit that fold button, it'll actually collapse the piano roll to only show the notes that I'm using. And this can be very handy for ergonomics, for workflow, to really just clear up what you're working with. Right? And you'll notice this other button called the scale button. This is actually very powerful, that you can actually collapse the piano roll similarly to what we did with the fold button. However, instead of just the notes you're using, you can collapse it to a specific scale. So to activate that feature, you'd simply hit this button over here to activate the scale, and then you could select whatever scale you wanted. So let's say D, I don't know, Dorian. Now all the notes of D Dorian are highlighted in your piano roll. So this is very handy if you are new to music theory, you're learning new scales, you're not sure which notes fit together. Well, you can select a scale here, and then it will show you all the notes that fit within that scale. And if you hit this button, it will actually fold your piano roll to only show you the notes in the scale. And in this example, I have a couple notes that aren't in the scale because the two chords I played are modulated chords, which basically mean they don't fit inside one scale. So that's why these two notes are grayed out, because they don't fit in the scale. All right, so beside the scale button, you can change the key center, and you can also change the type of scale. And there's so many scales to choose from. It's crazy. Some of these I've never even heard of, but it's an amazing feature to edit in your MIDI notes. And if we zoom in on this section, you'll notice that a few things are similar. We still have the divided by 2 and the times 2 button, which will do the same thing. If you select a certain notes and you hit this, it will divide their length in 2, or you can double their length just by simply hitting these buttons. Super handy button. You can also reverse notes, which won't really work for chords, but if you have a sequence of notes, let's say those two notes, and you selected them both, you could reverse them. Very handy. So you also have this handy duplicate button, which will actually duplicate your whole loop and then double the size of your loop. So if you hit that, now my loop is twice as long, and the chord progression repeats twice within the same loop. So if you select multiple notes, you can actually hit this randomize button to automatically randomize their values like we edited here in this menu. So if I hit that, you'll notice that their velocities got randomized. And if I select them again, you can actually change the velocity range of the notes, either up or down, which will add some variation to their velocities automatically over time instead of having to pencil it in manually. All right, you'll notice that there's 3 tabs in this MIDI clip view. So if we go to the second tab, this is actually very much the same to the second tab that we saw in the audio clip view. So this will allow you to change and automate certain settings throughout the clip specific to this clip. So for example, I wanted to change the track volume. I could select this and pencil in volume changes within this clip. I could also select sends, so you can also automate and pencil in the send amount of that knob that we looked at within a clip itself. You can also do this with track panning, track volume, and all sorts of other fun stuff simply by penciling in values here. And what's crazy, and bear with me here, is you can actually unlink the loops of your clip, so your MIDI clip with your performance data looping around, and you can offset that with the loop of your automation, and you can actually change the length of that automation so that it's repeating at different times throughout the loop. So you can have crazy amounts of variation just within a single clip by unlinking these and then changing the loop selection of just the automation that you've programmed for that clip. So that's pretty crazy stuff to play around with if you unlink these, but typically they are linked. And then finally, the third tab we have here is what is called MPE data. And this is actually new to Ableton 11 as well. And what MPE data, without getting too crazy, I've actually made a whole other video going into what is MPE. So if you're interested in learning about that, check out that video for sure. I'll link it in the card above. But basically, it's just extra parameters that you can edit, that you can perform in if you have a MIDI controller, and really just enhance your MIDI performances to a whole other level with these extra parameters. So you can change the slide and the pressure, which are 2 more types of input with MIDI controllers, and you can basically just edit these within these menus if you so choose. And hey, if you're just getting started with music production and feeling completely overwhelmed by the process or having trouble finishing projects, or hey, if you just want to get a glimpse inside my personal workflow, I've created a super easy to follow 7-step framework that helps you go from your first ideas all the way to a finished mix and master, so you can consistently finish songs and get better and better. And it's super handy to have around the studio as a printout. And that wraps it up for this video. We went for a deep dive into clip view for both audio clips and MIDI clips. There's a lot of power, a lot of crazy potential that you can tap into just within both of those clip views. We went over most of the features, so I hope that helped clear that up. So as we move forward, we're just going to continue to understand Ableton more and really start to unlock some of its powerful features and potential, and then apply that to making music together as we move forward. If you got value from this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you want to stay notified for the next transmission from Metamind Music in this tutorial series, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And hey, if you know anybody who's always been into music or is a musician and you know would benefit from understanding the ins and outs from recording software and the music production workflow, go ahead and share it with them, because the more the merrier, and I'm happy to have more people in this conversation. And if you have any questions tied to Ableton or music production in general, or if there's anything specific that you'd like to see me cover in this series, go ahead and drop a comment below. I'd love to start a conversation and get some feedback from you for the future parts of this series. And with that said, that wraps up this video, and we'll see you in the next one.